Okay, welcome back to another episode of Sex, Drugs, and Soul. I am excited today to have on a certified sexologist, a sex and intimacy coach, Coral Osborne. She's also a consultant. I love everything that she shares on social media at the Unreal Coral Osborne on Instagram. I'm like trying to narrow down some of these questions. Literally, I have notes.
I'm trying to remember my brain and things I've posted recently.
You're good. You're good. I'm like deep in the heart of my cycle too. So I'm like the height between that and, last week's luteal. I'm like, I've got to have my little prompting questions.
Yeah.
Feel more legit.
Cheat sheet.
Too. Yeah. I'd love to just, get started with maybe a couple like little icebreakers about like what's turning us on and off in life right now, before we dive into some of because I know you focus with men and I love that, that you're such a strong advocate for men. And I'd love to, explore some common sexual struggles and maybe go to some of these questions that I had or had chimed in from a couple of friends. So yeah, what's turning you off and on in life this moment? It can be sexual, non-sexual, it can be anything.
What's turning me on is slowness. This is my new thing. My mentor says, go as fast as the slowest part of you. And that is the way to become embodied, to attune, to really feel into pleasure. And pleasure doesn't have to just be sexual either. It's all things in life. It's taste, it's smell, it's, auditory, it's visual, it's everything, it's touch. So that's been the new trajectory I'm on because I've always been a very neurotic person. And then radical honesty. I mean, that's been a thing for a while for me, but I guess I'm learning the definition more because when I first leaned into that, I was prone to oversharing and trying to bypass intimacy that way. So it's knowing when to feel safe and be honest with someone.
I love that. Even your just invitation and voicing it to be slower, like gives me permission. It's like, okay, I can take a deep breath.
I know. I saw myself on a podcast like the other day and I was talking so fast. So I'm like, Coral, we're going to do some breath work every time we go in moving forward. And
we can take a breath right now.
Yeah. Take lots of pauses. Yes. Molten lava. Yeah.
I love it because I can tend to be like a little squirrel sometimes.
I can relate.
And I totally like get the oversharing thing too. And I didn't realize, I hadn't radically opened and healing journey or healing journey through openness, but now there is a little bit more discernment about, I'm like, okay, what do I feel comfortable sharing? And like, not everybody needs to know all the ins and outs and nooks and crannies. And like, have they, earned that space or that confidant or type of energy?
Yeah, it's tough because in my experience, after being repressed and living a double life, from sex work for so long, then when I came out with everything or was doxxed, but then stepped into my truth, I felt everyone felt like they were entitled to everything, to my truth. Like, and I didn't owe anyone an answer. So I leaned really heavily into that because I wanted to get my message across. But then it was like, my nervous system kind of just froze. I was in like freeze mode where I just didn't know who I actually was within that. Like, I'm like, who is Coral without speaking these things? So it's been interesting because also given the work that I do, what I share like publicly is it's more comfortable for me to do that than like one-on-one with someone. There's people I haven't even had conversations with about my past that we talk about normal things and then they see me making appearances on podcasts or going on social and talking about these things and they never ask me. So I'm like, and I don't bring it up either. So there's still work to be done there for sure.
Oh, I think that's an interesting point too. Like the wideness versus like the one-on-one, like confiding.
Yeah. And it's almost like more comfortable to start a relationship anew and, with my new self, my embodied self, then kind of regress and go back to trying to redefine the relationship that was. That is still challenging.
Mm. I love too that you mentioned like your past with sex. Or whenever I discovered your story, I was like, oh wow, she's open about it. I've had on and off like experience in that space too, and I was like, there's a big difference in deciding to share something and then being outed. And I was like, oh my god, like that is that. I'm like, my heart went out to you because I was when I watched this video, I'm like, holy shit, like to not have that choice or to be outed by someone. That's challenging and
Yeah.
fucking tough. And like you're put in a vulnerable space that you didn't choose to be and in some ways. And I admire your courage to continue sharing and whether on, on certain capacities, whether it's like broadcasting on social, whether it's in intimate spaces. Cause I love that your work that you're doing. And would you say that that is, that experience led to being a driver in, your advocacy for men?
Yeah, 1000%. Um, I had this whole idea of what sex work was. And my experiences of sex were not the healthiest before I got into it. Um, as a fearful avoidant type, and I had a lot of wounding around sex. I weaponized it, I used it to get validation. And then when I started doing sex work, I realized that there are so many reasons that men go seeking that. It's not just about pleasure. It's not just about validation. It's not just about connection. It can be all of those things. It can be none of those things. So what I found the most interesting that's like really stuck with me is I always equated monogamy to good and like infidelity to bad. And there's so much nuance in between. Like I met some really great men and a lot of single men too, who just could not find that intimacy out there in the real world. And I felt for them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, it was very cathartic for me as well, because it was this radical experience of honesty and vulnerability that was unmatched in the real world. These men would, tell me things and share things with me that they would never share with a spouse, with a partner, with a best friend. And in that container, there's so much freedom to explore because it's baseline transactional. So anything beyond that is just because you're opting in and you're deciding to share and you're deciding to explore.
Mm-hmm.
So very little of it was about the act itself, which will confuse a ton of people. Mind you, that's not the case for all sex workers. It's positioning. Like you can position yourself as a super vulgar podcast host that's making jokes all the time and like, this guy came on my face and blah, 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 and LOL. Or, you can have this analytical view of like sex and go deeper and talk about how meaningful it is to you. And a lot of sex workers are like that as well. I knew a lot of women that, they just wanted the lifestyle and they would be the ones to go to Vegas and like just be demeaned and demoralized by men. I could never do that. Like I felt like more of a whore in my dating life than I ever did in sex work ever. I actually was respected so much, and in probably a insidious way, it affected my ability to relate in the real world
Mm.
because I got this validation. I was in control. I ran the show and I got to be the fantasy. I was never the whole person. So it served them very well. And I realized I had a knack for like delving into what the core desires of men were, and not just sexually, what they were
Mm-hmm.
seeking emotionally, psychologically, and of course, physically, and what they were telling people in the outside world.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I relate in so many ways because some of the people that I met, like, we didn't even have a sexual relationship, but it was a very big driver for like connection and intimacy or like fun and playfulness at times too, like karaokeing in a room together or like, I mean, and them saying it's like the best night of their lives. And yeah, the confessions of longings and desires and secrets. And like you mentioned core desires, I'm so curious too about your experience and like what some of the core drivers in those aspects were. Like what were they coming or what like emotionally? Um,
So a lot of men's wounding comes from the Madonna-Whore
oh
complex,
yeah, let's go
which is a split where men can't reconcile that women are whole. So they either, you know, see women as pure and virtuous and sexless, or promiscuous, desirable, and unworthy of love and respect. And that typically comes from the mother wound.
there.
So there's a few ways that can happen. Um, one of them is the mother gives inconsistent love. So, she only awards, say, performance and good behavior and just isn't consistent. So then he puts her up on a pedestal. And then so women are now on a pedestal, but, a sexually free woman is seen as emotionally unsafe.
Mm,
And then there is shame around sex. So if your mother or parents or society shames you for being sexual, sex is bad, women that dress like that are bad, it's dirty, then those desires become repressed. So then the man grows up to believe that and repress his desires. So he'll end up with the Madonna, but then yearn for, the whore. And then, we go into emotional unavailability. So if the mother was unavailable,
mm,
maybe she remarried, maybe she traveled a lot for work, she just wasn't available, then the man will seek emotion or will seek validation through sex. And he'll go for an emotionally unavailable partner who's chaotic and exciting, highly sexualized, and mistake that for an emotional connection.
mm,
And then lastly, there's the mixed messages around masculinity. So the mother will say, be nice, be a good boy, but then she will date or be married to the very assertive, dominant, perhaps, toxic masculine.
mm,
And so the man, the young boy who grows into a man, will then split, and either he'll be the nice boy that has these secret desires,
mm,
or he'll rebel and become the dominant, assertive or toxic masculine who is always with the whore archetype. So everything can basically be traced back to that.
mm-hmm,
And I think why men go to sex workers is, initially they're looking for that whore experience. It's like they can be completely uninhibited and feel like they don't have to repress anything. But, what ends up happening a lot is like they ended up seeing the whore as the Madonna as well. And I've seen that reconciliation play out, and it's
mm,
pretty fascinating. I would like it to not result in men having to go see sex workers
yeah,
for that to happen. I'd like to preempt it. And that's
mm-hmm,
like why I love the work that I do, because, the more you repress or suppress your core desires, the bigger they get. And then you tend to eroticize trauma,
mm,
and then they get out of control. And that's where the cheating comes in, the, sliding into girls' DMs when your girlfriend's in the next room, or sleeping with the escort on a work trip, or having an affair at the office. And there's a way we can address this before it gets to that
mm.
point.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. If someone is like listening, like, okay, I think that I may fall into the emotionally unavailable category or one of the other ones that you described. How do they begin like that self-inquiry process of identifying it and then integrating it into, their dating choices or their
Yes,
life?
great question.
Yeah.
So you have to start by identifying the origin of the split.
Mm,
So when did that happen? What was it, as all the things I just listed?
mm-hmm,
And what did you make that mean? And then what are you afraid will happen if you're found out?
mm,
What are you afraid the woman that you're dating will find out about you if she knew, what you truly desired? And then how do you cope? What do you do? So those reasons I just listed, do you go to porn? Do you cheat? Do you secretly text message women behind your partner's back? What do you do that um, perpetuates that split? And then you have to practice asserting yourself. So it's not an easy process. You
Mm-mm.
have to get really real with yourself. But honestly, what's the alternative? And I have a whole framework around that because that's kind of that's the root of everything that I work with. And like we spoke about with sex work, similarly, there's ways to A/B test
Mm.
women, right?
Mm.
Like you shouldn't just pour on every desire, every thought you've ever had. You don't know if it's safe to do that.
Mm.
So there's ways you can start introducing those things and say, listen, I'm prone to splitting. I'm prone to doing this. This is what I've done in past
Mm. Mm.
relationships. And I don't want to do that anymore.
Mm.
And you would be surprised that when you lead with that honesty, the response you get from women. Because what do women want the most? What is the most attractive thing to them? Feeling safe.
Mm.
So if you're honest, she's going to feel safe.
Mm.
And it's going to be this beautiful feedback loop where you step in one toe at a time.
Mm. I love that. Yeah, when I think back, I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. The times where I didn't feel safe when they weren't honest, and I gave them the space to
Oh,
be
yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
That was the most challenging. I'm like, why can't I'm like, I give you space. I think I'm communicating or giving like an open space for you to bring all of who you are, your desires or your boundaries, your fears. So when I find out about something, then there's like I feel a little bit betrayed because I gave you the space and now I don't trust you or feel safe.
It is the weirdest thing. I actually had an experience not too long ago with a gentleman that I was not exclusive with. He was a lot younger than me. But we were spending time together and it was really healing in a lot of ways because he was a lot younger. So it was like I was out of a relationship and then, I met him and we just had a profound like physical connection, to be honest. That was very healing. And so I said to him out of the gates, honesty and trust is like imperative for this to work. And unprovoked by me, he said on our second date, like, oh, just to let you know, I deleted Hinge and we deleted this. And I was like, first of all, I didn't say this, but I'm like, because I don't owe him anything.
Yeah.
He offered this up, which I was like, okay. I didn't really say anything to it. I was like, okay. He's like, I just can't talk to two women at once. And I was like, okay, you're also 25, so you should be, but sure. And then it was like a week later, I'd asked him if he'd ever had a threesome, and he was like, no, but I matched with this porn star on Hinge last week, and I was like, I'm sorry, what? And I just checked him right then. I was like, listen, when you say this, my nervous system short circuits. This whole relationship, although it's not a formal relationship, is built on trust. We need to have that, or else what is the point? I'm not safe to explore. I can't go there with you.
Mm-hmm.
So if we don't have that, we have nothing. And when I'm not even asking you for any sort of truth or interrogating you, why would you offer up a lie? And I kind of think I've gotten to the bottom of it because it's happened more than once, happened a few times with me. And I think it's because of my experience and me being so open with that it does intimidate men. And I think I have inadvertently emasculated them, which is something I'm always working on. And so they feel like they need to have something to themselves,
Mm.
right? They need to have some experience to themselves that they don't want to let me in on because for them that represents autonomy, even though it doesn't actually. It's an illusion of autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
But so I can totally relate to that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, you mentioned like Hinge and dating apps too. I'm like, oh, I want to get your thoughts on that arena.
I deleted it right after that.
I downloaded it because I was having a moment before I moved into my new place and met my current interest or one of them. And I was like, okay, well, how am I going to meet someone? I'm like, I've just turned 37. I'm like, how am I going to meet someone? They're not going to come up to my door. I guess I've got to like put myself out there in some ways. And so I wanted to go to this like horse riding thing that a girlfriend had posted. I was like, well, maybe I'll download and find a cute little date to go explore there and go. But then I definitely deleted it within like a week or two. I was just like, I just can't. I was like, I just can't do this anymore. And I think you shared something on Instagram one time that I loved about putting yourself in new spaces, or like just getting out and about as an alternative to dating apps. Or like, I would love for you to just like, expand on
I mean,
your thoughts
easier
on
said
dating
than
apps.
done, and
Yeah.
I'm sort of a hypocrite when it comes to this. My girlfriend is staying with me right now. She's the one that's
Oh,
hosting
so pumped.
the erotica night
Yeah.
tonight. And we went to the coffee shop behind my house, and I'm like, in sweats, messy bun, hood up, and I was joking, and I was like, she's like, there's so many cute guys here. I'm like, I know, like all it takes is for me to not work in my bed, some days, or from my kitchen table, actually get dressed and go to this coffee shop, and like, I could probably actually get asked out in real life. And she's like, why don't you do that? I'm like, I don't know. Like, that's the easiest thing you can do that will change your entire energetic field. And I
Mhm.
do things to mix it up, but it's been a lot of reprogramming, because we've had to deprogram ourselves from this dating app culture, this like quick fix culture, which
Mm,
is an illusion of options that's not really there, because it's one dimensional what you're seeing on the screen, right?
mhm,
For me, it takes a lot for me to be interested in someone. Attraction on its own, physical attraction does nothing for me.
mhm,
The older I get, the more nuanced it gets. So I really need that in-person experience to get the essence of someone.
mhm,
And men will say that too. They can see the hottest woman on a dating app, and since they're, visual and they're single cued, so they just need to see a pretty face, a great chest or a great ass, and like that's going to make them swipe. Doesn't mean they're bad for it. It's just that's what they're looking for initially. That's
mhm,
what attracts them. Whereas women have a holistic approach, like when they're swiping, they're actually
mm,
reading the
mm,
profile.
mhm,
There's data that shows they spend 14 more seconds on average longer reading a profile than a man does. So, yeah, we shouldn't, vilify one or the other. Men aren't bad for that. But yeah, putting ourselves in different settings. And for me, I had to check myself too, because I'm more attracted to introverted men.
mm,
I I'm an extrovert. Well, I'm an ambivert, but like if we're one on one, or if I'm with like up to 6 people, I will talk over everyone, which I need to work on. But I don't like men to be like that. I need
mm,
a yang to my yang, and this goes with
mm,
polarity.
mm,
So that might be a traditionally like masculine trait, to be more dominant in conversation, but this is why it's about polarity and not
mm,
sticking, to fixed masculine and feminine. So I realized, since, I am the more assertive, extroverted one, that I probably need to start talking to men. And I'm not saying like
mm,
I just mean breaking the ice and like
mhm,
saying hi. Just saying hi, or just smiling at them,
mm,
because when I'm out in public, as a lot of women are, we're in our own worlds, we're not making eye contact, and it's all left on the guy. And that's pretty
mhm,
brutal, especially seeing as the last few years they've been conditioned to
mm,
not have a rejection tolerance through apps.
mm,
So we've kind of got to meet them halfway. And
mhm,
just by like smiling, or, having warm body language, holding eye contact for like 3 seconds, which sounds easy as hell, but it's not. But, doing those nonverbal cues, it takes 29 of them to actually signal interest in a way that a
wow.
man will finally pick up. 29 of those subtle cues. So it's like, do you do that, or do you just bite the bullet and say, "Hey"? Is that so hard? And for some reason, we think that's terrifying. But if we're asking men to sack up and ask us out
Mhm,
in the real world,
mm.
then the least we can do is drop our handkerchief.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
I love that. Drop our finger, open the door
yeah,
a little bit, leave
yeah.
a ribbon on the door. I love that. So you mentioned a couple of things from that I'm like, oh, okay, I want to go maybe in that direction or this one. Because I would love to explore like polarity more, because I haven't really read a lot about it, or like those dynamics. And I just love what you said too about um, like opening them and opening the space for them to approach. And it made me think of like also like the Me Too, like,
Mhm.
are they a little bit more hesitant to even approach since that movement? because of like not only rejection, but like, okay, how is this going to be taken or seen or read? Or, you know, I could see where there would be even more increased fear
Yeah.
in that capacity. And I'm like, 29 freaking clues.
I know.
I'm like, I thought my one eye contact. Or
I know. I thought this was okay.
yeah. And I, you know, I'm feeling awkward as hell.
Yeah.